beating your children correctly in Proverbs 20:29-30, that if you don't beat your children, that you don't love them. Proverbs 13:24. Well, Proverbs 20:29-30 says that the glory of young men is their strength, and that the splendor of old men is their gray head. Blows that hurt cleanse away evil, and do stripes the inner depths of the heart. Proverbs 13:24 reads, he who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him promptly. Now, while I don't see the word beat in here, in either of these scriptures, once again, you got to look at the context in which this scripture is actually being written. Whether you believe in timeout, which would have never worked with me, or spanking, the context of this scripture is to discipline your child when they do things that are unacceptable. Think about it this way. If your child is doing something that's dangerous, potentially life-threatening, what are you going to do as a parent? You know, are you going to just watch them and let them do it? You're not just going to watch them and let them do it. Because if you love your child, then what you're going to do, you're going to react in such a way that you're going to let this child know that their actions or their behavior is unacceptable and potentially dangerous to their health. Anyone that's not going to discipline their child is just opening up their child to do more misbehavior, and just to go from one level of misbehavior to another level of misbehavior. In some form or fashion, we discipline our child, whether it's, like I said, timeout, a spanking, grounding, punishment. You discipline your child. This scripture is talking about that if you love your child, you're going to discipline your child. You're just not going to let them just get away with things and just let them run amok. Her comment number 8, that stubborn and rebellious children should be taken to the town elders and stoned to death. Well, once again, she didn't give any scripture. I happen to know what she's talking about. She's just referring to Deuteronomy 21:19-21, which reads, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him and bring him out to the elders of the city and unto the gates of this place, and they shall say unto the elders of the city, this is our son, is stubborn and rebellious, and he will not obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard. And the men of the city shall stone him with stones, that he die. So shall thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Now, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but once again, we're talking about an Old Testament scripture that once again was not written to the majority of us. And any of us who are alive now, but it's written to the Israelite people. Deuteronomy 1:1, these be the words of Israel, spake unto Israel. That's what this is talking about. He's talking about the words of Israel, the words of Moses that are spoken to the children of Israel. This is not even talking to us. In observing the context in which it's written, Moses is giving the people an example of how sin should be dealt with amongst the Israelite people. God looks at sin like rot on an apple in a barrel of other apples. And we all know what happens when you got rot on an apple in a barrel of other apples. The rot spreads to all of the other apples. And so what God is looking at here is that in many cases in the Old Testament, which once again was not written to us, in order to stop sin from spreading throughout all of the people, what God would rather do is he would rather condone the removal of the one bad apple, as it were. Think of it this way. If you got an infection and it's basically killed off all the nerves and the muscles, in one of your fingers, and it's threatening to spread to other fingers or spread throughout your hand, the doctor's tried all that he can do, and he's been unsuccessful in reversing the effects, and he suggests amputation. Do you blame the doctor? You don't blame the doctor that he says amputation. Bad doctor, no. You weigh the pros and the cons of allowing the affected area to remain. Do we allow it to remain and then infect everything else and cause damage in other places? God does the same thing. He looks at it and says, look, should he sacrifice one so that he can save the rest? Sort of sounds like what he did with Jesus, doesn't it? Sacrificing one for the rest. So Christ also answered the question about stoning as a result of sin in John 8:1-11, when he was asked about a woman who was caught in adultery. Should she be stoned? Because the law of the Old Testament suggested that that's what should be happening. That was the penalty for her sin, that she should be stoned. Old Testament. Jesus now says, his answer is basically, he that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone. This was in John 8 and 7. And as you read on, you see that all of the persons, all of the guys that were going to stone her, dropped their stones. And the woman was told by Jesus to go and sin no more. So that's Jesus' answer in the New Testament about what we should do when it regards to stoning in Old Testament law. Now, her last comment was, you'll really be happy if you dash your infants against the rocks. Once again, she didn't give any scriptural reference to this, but I know what she's referring to. She's referring to Psalms 137, 1 through 9. Once again, don't want to sound like a broken record. You got to understand the context of the scripture here. If you read the entire scripture, you will find that this passage is about a group of individuals that are being held captive by the Babylonians. They've been asked to sing by the Babylonians some of the songs that they sing in their homeland. Think about it this way. You get held captive by a foreign government. And this foreign government asks you, hey, why don't you sing the Star Spangled Banner? Why don't you sing your national anthem? Why don't you entertain us? You know, you're being held against your will. You're not being treated nicely. You really don't want to sing the national anthem. You really don't want to entertain them. In fact, you know, you may have some harsh feelings that you'd want to do against these people who are holding you captive. And so that's what's going on here. How do you think you'd feel in this situation? Psalm 137 goes on to tell us in 8 and 9, it says, O daughter of Babylon, who art thou, who art to be destroyed? Happily shall he be that rewarded thee as thou hast served us. So basically, they're not being served very nicely. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. So this psalm is not referring to dashing their own children against the stones, but it's talking about how the anger that these people have now is that it's an anger that's directed against the Babylonians who are holding them captives and somebody dashing their children against the stone. It's a response to someone that's being held against their will, that's being held in captivity, and that's being mistreated while they're in captivity. It's not a command by God to go and do this. That's not what the scripture is saying. But it's just basically the response of an angry person. It's not saying that God told you to go do this. It's a response of an angry person that's being held in captivity against their will. So I realize that I've covered a lot of things and that people are going to believe what they want to believe. Life is choice driven. We live and we die according to the choices that we make. So we need to make our choices wisely. Scripture has rules of interpretation. You have to understand the context that it's written in. You have to understand who it's written to. Are we writing? Is the scripture being written to the church? Is it being written to Israelite people? Is it being written to Gentiles? We have to look at all of these things. You just can't take scriptures and run with them. And many people that have problem interpreting the Bible, that's exactly what they do. They just take scripture, they run with it. They don't understand the rules to scripture, how to interpret it. They don't understand that sometimes you got to look at the Hebrew words. You have to look at the Greek words that were in the original text because there may not be the same exact meaning in our English language. And so it causes people to have these bad interpretations of the Bible and things and sort. Things such and so. So that's my 2 cents. Take it for what you want. I encourage you once again to read the entire scripture when you have situations such as this. That's me.